In the past 10 months, I have made over 15 prototypes, and whilst some of them, well, most of them, have ended up in my graveyard pile of shame, never to be touched again because they were just bad prototypes, bad ideas and all of that, some of them have become foundations of games that we have released to this day with good ratings, and I think part of why they were so successful was the fact that we did good prototypes in advance. It's something that I honestly, 2 years ago, didn't do at all. 2 years ago, we were beginner developers, I would say, in the way that we just thought about an idea and then we write down our game design document or whatever and we just think about it of like, yeah, this sounds like a good game idea, let's just go for it. And that's how you end up wasting a lot of time. We've had to cancel projects 8 months into development, whatever, with very little, reusable or very little to show for it. And I made that decision of, okay, screw that, we're gonna prototype more and it's going to help us out. And so far it has. So in this video, I want to talk to you a bit more about how do you actually prototype successful, coming from someone who I think at this point is a bit of a serial prototyper, whether you think that's good or bad. So first of all, we have to get this out of the way quickly. Why should you prototype? Well, this allows you to realize before you spend, like I said, months of development on your game, figure out, is this game idea that I have, is this gameplay loop that I have actually a good one, a fun one, and does this game have a fighting chance on Steam? Because that's also part of prototyping. Prototyping, I think, is not just about figuring out, is the core gameplay loop good? It's also about figuring out, does this game have a chance in terms of marketability? Would this be something that other people are interested in? I have 3 main categories basically of prototyping, and generally you combine all 3 of these together, but the main obvious one that you probably think about as well is the fun prototype. So this is where you want to make a very simple version of your game with the core goal being to figure out, is this game fun to play? Maybe the mechanics are dog shit and you don't like it, but then you know it at least. You know that this is not a fun game. And the goal here is to just test out the core gameplay loop. Whether it's like combat or building or whatever, doesn't matter. You want to figure out what is that core mechanic that people will be doing throughout the entire game, and can I make it fun? Then we get to the marketability prototype, where here the focus isn't just on, okay, what's the gameplay loop, but it's more of, okay, if someone doesn't know what this game is, could I show them what the game is visually and make them interested? Because believe it or not, guys, a good game standalone in terms of game design will not sell itself. You need to have a game that people are interested in and that they want to learn more about. And the easiest way to do that is by having a visual identity, for example. So this is where you're going to focus on your visuals, for example. You're going to see if you can make like a short mini 15 seconds kind of fake but still functional trailer, for example. This is something you see often where you use that mini prototype trailer almost as a way to validate, okay, are people interested in this and should we keep on going? And then the last thing is kind of more of a technical kind of prototype where you're more going to validate your systems. You see this more if you're making like automation games or deep strategy games or whatever, where you have an idea, but you know that it's going to take most likely a few months before you can make all the pieces come together. Like I said, with automation games, you have all these different little building blocks that all are standalone, that all need to be made, but that aren't fun standalone. The fun only comes from having like 12 different like workstations, conveyor belts, trains, whatever, and having them all mesh and interact with each other. But you can't do all of that the right way immediately from your game, and there may be some technical design decisions that you need to do as well, like how do you do inventory and all of that. So in this technical prototype, you're just going to make like the worst possible version basically to figure out all the potential roadblocks you're going to have if you want to take this like technical design to the next level and make it actually production ready. I always talk about the danger of unknown unknowns, so that's challenges that you don't know at the start of development that will become a challenge. And by doing things like this, you are going to reduce the amount of like unknown unknowns for your game, especially from a code-wise perspective. So those are the 3 main goals. Now, generally you want to kind of hit upon all of these 3 notes in that same single prototype, but I just want you to know that just making a prototype on its own, you need to have a little bit more direction of what exactly do you want to figure out. But you may be like, okay, hey, prototyping sounds all cool and fun, but honestly, I think there are a lot of dangers as well that I want you to keep in mind when you start prototyping, because I have fallen into these dangers sometimes as well. So we have fallen into these as well. And I think the biggest problem is the problem of time and time constraints, where there's a very big risk that, okay, you have a really good game idea or a prototype idea basically, and you start working on it, but you keep telling yourself, just one more little like side feature and then I think I have the core gameplay loop. And suddenly you're 3 weeks into prototyping and you've kind of gotten emotionally attached to your game. You've given it a name, maybe you've mocked up some little art or whatever as well, and you don't want to let it go anymore. You don't want to just get rid of the game that you've already been working on for 3 months. It's kind of like growing your own little baby maybe you probably don't want to chuck it out into the bin anymore once it's gotten some actual tangible shape. And this is the danger, because if you're going to keep prototyping for like months on end basically, and then that prototype is slowly going to morph into the real game, you're going to be running both into validation problems where you may have never actually been able to truly validate the core gameplay loop because you kept on stacking more features and more mechanics and all of that. And you also may just be working on a game that is not going to be a good, marketable, all of the above basically, and you're going to spend time on something that isn't worth it. And you can be like, oh yes, but I prototyped it, but you didn't really. You just immediately went into straight development. And the other thing can be true as well, where you don't spend a lot of time on your prototypes, but you just make so many, where prototype fatigue, I would say, is a thing as well, where if you do prototyping correctly and only spend like, let's say 1 to 3 days per prototype, well, you're quickly going to rack up, like I said, 10 prototypes or whatever, sometimes even in just 1 month, and it can be incredibly demotivating. There's a great video about Jonas Tyrol about like prototyping and figuring out what's the best game, and it's kind of the issue of like local maximum, where you have a prototype, maybe it's your 4th prototype, whatever, and it is a 6 out of 10 in terms of how good it is, for example. And your previous prototypes were all garbage. The question then is, okay, do I still have the energy to prototype a few more games, knowing that maybe the next prototype is going to be a 5 out of 10, but the prototype I make after that will be an 8 out of 10 and what I actually want to make? Or do I just say, I'm kind of sick and tired of prototyping, and you end up taking that 6 out of 10 prototype and being like, this is good enough, let's make a full game about it. And I think this is the problem if you prototype too much without having like a clear vision of, okay, this is the game that I want to end up making. At a certain point, you're going to get kind of sick of prototyping and you're just going to take whatever the best thing is that you've had so far, whilst in reality, it may not have been the actual best thing to do. And it brings me kind of to that lost danger where there's no guarantee that even if you have a prototype, the game's going to be a success. It's going to reduce the risk for your game, but you may still end up with the problem of, okay, what I had as a gameplay idea that maybe took 10 minutes in my prototype actually rapidly falls apart after the 30-minute mark. Of like, you know, the combat is very fast-paced and very hype and all of that right when you get started for those first 10 minutes, but you don't know yet now, can I extend this for 2 hours? Can I make this an entire game? And there's very little to say here in terms of like how to avoid it. I just want you to know that, okay, prototyping is important, but it's not a foolproof approach. There may still be issues, there may still be risks, so keep those things in mind as well. So now I want to give you some of my personal quick tips basically on prototyping and what I've learned, how I think we've been able to make some decent prototype and not get stuck on them basically. And I think the big one, and kind of alluded to it before, is that every single day that you work on your prototype has to prove its right of existence before you take it out of the barn and shoot it through the head with a 12-gauge shotgun. So basically, every day after you're prototyping, let's say you prototype for like 4 hours a day or whatever, at the end of the day, you want to look at the game and be like, okay, am I making enough progress? Is this still going the right track? And do I think that with an extra day of work, this can be worth it? And if the answer to that is no, you should immediately just kill it. Because at the end of the day, ideas are cheap, ideas are plenty, so you're better off than just moving on to the next thing instead of trying to bog yourself down for a week or whatever, trying to make a game that doesn't really work and that doesn't really make sense, still trying to make it work, for example. To give you an idea, most of my prototypes do not get past the 2-day mark. And if they get past the 2-day mark, then they basically were the prototype for Kyoto Anomaly, which is the game that we ended up releasing, because we could see there is the vision, the mechanics are doable, and I think this is something that can still be fun overall. But there's a lot of other prototypes where, sure, these sounded interesting, but there are certain reasons why we can't make them work. And you know, the kind of value that the prototype needs to deliver day by day should also go up. Like day one, you can kind of be like, yeah, it's still kind of rough, but it's just the first day. Especially if you go into the later days, it needs to fight more and more to keep that right. Like for example, if you have a 4 out of 10 prototype idea on day 1, sure, you can live with it. But if that doesn't become a 6 out of 10 idea on day 2, and then a 7 out of 10 idea on day 3, then probably this isn't going to be the prototype for you to make. Because once again, the core goal here is simply to make sure that you don't get bogged down and stuck on that one single prototype that may not be worth it. Another tip that I have, and this is a very important one I think, to increase that potential value basically of like how good is this prototype, is to think about visuals, music, and like ambient sound and all of that from day one and implement it as well. If you want to know the secret to taking your game from a 3 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10, it's probably going to be just having a fitting soundtrack and an ambient track. So like, for example, wind noise and whatever, it's going to make the game feel more alive. And I think music is something that is super easy to implement at the end of the day, and can, especially in this prototyping stage, massively change the feel of your game. A fantasy city builder, for example, that is just dead silent is going to be way less interesting than if there's just like a cute RPG soundtrack going on, for example. It's immediately going to showcase the vibe of the game as well. Is this happy music? Is this like more sad music? Is this tense music? These are decisions that can take literally just 15 minutes to implement music into your game. But if you want to show your game, for example, to someone else, or just even for yourself, getting the vibe of this game, I think it's really good to just understand more about like, hey, how would this game feel as a final end goal player? Same thing with visuals. I know there's a very loud cam that's like only gray box and all of that, but if you already add some of your visual style assets, whether that is just like synthy asset packs that are like more low poly polygon style, or it is more PBR materials, this will once again very drastically change the mood of your game. Do you have like a very realistic forest for your game, for example? Or is it a cute stylized low poly forest? Well, even though the core gameplay mechanic of, I don't know, picking up acorns is going to be the exact same thing in this game, the feeling that this game is going to have is going to be very different if you're using that stylized forest versus you have some volumetric fog and you have some realistic trees, because now it's suddenly going to feel way more like a horror game, for example. And that is, I think, something that, once again, one of those 3 reasons why you prototype, the visual appeal and the marketing appeal, is something that you shouldn't forget about. And then my last tip, once you have realized that, hey, this is actually a correct prototype, is that you're going to throw away all of the code that you've written before. You're going to just like have a build of the game to look back at, okay, what was my vision here? But you're not going to keep building upon that prototype. The goal for this is simple. You want to move fast, and if you're going to be making that prototype, immediately worrying about like scalability and long-term systems and all of that, well, you're not going to be able to actually have the velocity needed to make a good prototype in 2 days, because you're going to be spending the entire first day figuring out the potential long-term architecture for having like 20 different buildings and all of that, when in reality your prototype just needs like 3 shitty hard-coded buildings and that's it. It doesn't need to have that scalability yet, because you also don't even know if you're going to keep working on this game. Another benefit here is that you may not even know yet what kind of systems you need to design for. Whether, for example, I keep bringing this up in an automation game. Do you want, for example, your inventory to be local or to be transported on the conveyor belt as well? These are going to be design decisions that you don't know yet in the beginning what's the best one. Having these prototypes where it's just very shitty is going to show you a lot of the like hard points and the challenges of the game, and you can keep that in mind once you actually start thinking about the full architecture. Once you've decided, hey, I think this game has potential, let's spend some more time on it. And that brings us to the final question, and that is, when do you know if your prototype is actually good enough and it has enough potential? And there's a few things here. I think a very important thing is that it should give you a clear view of what the game is going to be about. You should be able to, after you've made the prototype, be able to explain clearly to other people what the game is. Because it's kind of like putting words to paper, except now you're putting code into your engine of, okay, I had this idea, I didn't know yet what it looked like in the actual game or like in the engine. Now that I know, now I can actually see what's the fun thing about this game. And now you can be like, hey, I'm making an action RPG and all you do is fight bosses or whatever. And if you're able to explain the game, another benefit here, or like kind of a win condition, is that you understand not just that the game is fun, but you understand why the game is fun. You understand the underlying reason and motivation of what keeps someone playing this game. Because yeah, you can just add like a big fancy feel and whatever to your game, and okay, it's going to be kind of fun to play, but if you don't fully understand what makes this game fun, you're going to run into design issues later on, because you don't really understand that core of what makes this game the game that it actually is going to be. And that also brings us kind of into the final thing of, you should have something that, even though it's just a 5-minute or a 10-minute prototype, you are able to keep replaying it. You can play it more and more, and you're going to find yourself gravitate towards it and be like, hey, actually, I want to give this one more round, see if I can come up with some more ideas of what I want to do here. Not implement them, just come up with some ideas, and you're almost zoning out with playing your game. We've had that in some of our prototypes as well, even though they may not have gone anywhere. I think if you want to go from more of the marketing perspective and less of the fun aspect, this would also be where you record like a 10 to 15 second gameplay clip of your game and you upload it to like Discord, maybe Twitter, and I think a low-key hidden one is YouTube Shorts or TikTok, whatever, like a short form content platform. And you're going to make this kind of intentionally shitty, where you're just going to take your phone, put it in the portrait mode, and you're going to record your gameplay like on your screen basically, and just have like the little caption of I prototyped this game, what do you guys think? Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it very low like production quality, just to see what do people think about this. The reason I go for TikTok and YouTube Shorts is because they give you more like organic reach, whereas YouTube, if you're starting with a brand new account, doesn't really give you that same reach as with short form platforms, and you don't have that much to showcase for your game anyway. So those are basically the main takeaways that I have about how should you prototype. So I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the prototype kind of gives you closure. It either allows you to realize that this is something that we may actually have potential with. It's going to answer the question, is this a game that we should be making and that we can make? And if not, it's going to give you the closure to kind of be like, we've given it our all, we've tried making this, we've realized it's not a good game because of this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason. And if you just walk away without any regret, you're going to also notice you're going to stop daydreaming about it. That's, I think, a big one as well. When you come up with like game ideas and you start thinking about it, and it kind of takes up like processing capacity in your brain. By having put out that prototype, even if it just took like a day or 2 days or whatever, you can at least answer the question to yourself of like, you know, actually, this wasn't the game for us right now. This wasn't maybe the best game to make. Let's just move on, and no worries, no regrets. So that's all I have to say. I'm curious, how much do you prototype, and how has the prototyping experience been for you? Do you often find yourself like stuck for a month on a prototype, or do you think that, hey, I am actually pretty good at doing it in a pretty short time? Leave a comment down below. I'm always interested to hear more about what you guys are doing. And apart from that, thank you very much for watching. If you're new here, we're a game development studio and we upload videos every week talking about the things that we learn running our own game dev studio and actually making and shipping games. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to head down below and subscribe, because it's a win-win for both of us. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!